My dear child, something has just happened that almost no one gets to experience. A letter has finally reached you after being hidden for far too long. But there is one terrifying condition attached to it. You have only a few moments before every word disappears forever, taking with it a truth your soul has been waiting to hear for years. If you walk away now, you may never know what was written for you. Listen carefully. Some messages are never meant for the eyes of the world. They are written only once, carried through silence, protected by time, and revealed only when two souls are finally ready to hear the truth. What is about to unfold is one of those messages. The letter did not arrive through ordinary hands. It was never placed in a mailbox, never delivered by a stranger, and never carried across a crowded street. Instead, it waited in a place where memories refused to die. Every day your soulmate wanted to write to you, something interrupted them. Fear, family pressure, misunderstandings, distance, and countless moments of doubt stood between their heart and yours. Yet none of those obstacles erased what they truly felt. Don't skip. The night this letter was written was unlike any other. Your soulmate had reached a point where silence became heavier than speaking. They sat alone, staring at a blank page for what felt like hours. They started writing your name, stopped, erased it, then wrote it again. Their hands trembled because every sentence carried a piece of their heart. They knew that if anyone else discovered the letter, everything could change. Still, they continued. The first line was not an apology. It was not an explanation either. It was a confession they had never spoken aloud. They admitted that no matter how many people entered their life, no one ever replaced the space you occupied within them. They tried convincing themselves that forgetting you would make life easier, but every attempt only reminded them of how deeply your presence had become part of their soul. As each sentence filled the page, tears quietly stained the paper. Those tears were not signs of weakness. They were evidence of years spent pretending everything was fine while carrying emotions no one else could see. Every memory of you returned with incredible clarity. The conversations, the dreams, the promises that were never spoken aloud, and even the moments where nothing was said but everything was understood. Don't skip. Then something unexpected happened. Just as your soulmate prepared to finish the letter, someone walked toward the room. Panic rushed through them. They folded the page, hid it quickly, and acted as though nothing had happened. But before leaving, they whispered one sentence to themselves. If this letter ever finds them, they'll finally know why I never stopped loving them. Those words were never meant for anyone else's ears. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The hidden letter remained untouched. Dust gathered around it, but the emotions inside never faded. Your soulmate often returned to where it was hidden, not to destroy it, but simply to make sure it still existed. Every visit reminded them that one truth remained unfinished. They believed fate would eventually decide whether you deserved to read those words. What they never realized was that someone else had already noticed the letter's existence. And that discovery was about to change everything. Don't skip. One ordinary afternoon, a family member accidentally opened the place where the letter had been hidden for so long. At first, they thought it was just another old piece of paper. But the moment they unfolded it and saw the very first line, their expression completely changed. They stopped breathing for a second because the very first word written in that letter was your name. And the next sentence explained a truth that no one in the family had ever known. The moment your name was seen, the room no longer felt ordinary. No one expected that a single page, hidden for so long, could carry the weight of years of silence. The family member looked around to make sure no one else was watching, then continued reading. With every line, the expression on their face changed from curiosity to shock, and finally to regret. They had believed a completely different story all this time. They thought your soulmate had willingly moved on, accepted the distance, and forgotten everything that once connected the two of you. But this letter destroyed that belief within seconds. Don't skip. One sentence stood out more than every other word on the page. It read, "If they ever believe I stopped loving them, then my greatest failure will not be losing them. It will be allowing them to live with a lie." The family member froze. Those words did not sound like someone who had given up. They sounded like someone who had been forced into silence while their heart continued calling only one person: you. As they kept reading, another hidden truth surfaced. Your soulmate confessed that there were many moments when they almost came to find you. More than once, they stood only one decision away from reaching out. They even wrote messages that were never sent, made phone calls that were disconnected before the first ring, and turned back from journeys that were meant to bring them closer to you. Every time they gathered enough courage, something unexpected happened that pulled them away again. Don't skip. The letter then revealed something even more heartbreaking. Your soulmate admitted that they had never allowed anyone to replace you in their heart, even when people around them encouraged them to move on. They smiled in front of others, but inside they carried the same unanswered questions every single day. They wondered whether you had forgotten them, whether you had found happiness, or whether you still felt the invisible connection that refused to disappear. The family member could no longer continue reading without tears. Every assumption they had made about you suddenly collapsed. They remembered conversations from the past, moments when your name had been mentioned, and how quickly those conversations had always been stopped. Only now did they understand why. The truth had been hidden, not because it was small, but because it was powerful enough to change everything. Don't skip. Then they reached the final part of the letter. The handwriting became less steady, as if each word had been written through tears. It said, "If this letter ever reaches you, don't remember me for the distance between us. Remember me for the love that never changed, even when everything else did. I never stopped choosing you inside my heart, even on the days the world believed I had." The moment the family member stepped outside with the letter clutched tightly in trembling hands, they realized they were racing against something far greater than time. The ink continued fading before their eyes, almost as if every word had fulfilled its purpose the instant another heart finally understood the truth. They no longer cared about protecting old secrets or preserving appearances. For years they had unknowingly believed stories that painted you as the reason everything had fallen apart. But after reading that letter, they understood the opposite was true. Someone had worked very hard to keep two hearts separated, and that hidden interference had stolen years that neither you nor your soulmate could ever recover. As they hurried down the road, memories returned with painful clarity. They remembered every moment someone changed the subject whenever your name was mentioned, every suspicious conversation that suddenly ended when another family member entered the room, every decision that seemed strangely rushed. Pieces that never fit together before now formed one heartbreaking picture. Don't skip. When they finally found your soulmate, the sight before them stopped them in their tracks. Your soulmate was standing quietly with a small travel bag beside them. There were no wedding decorations, no celebration, no excitement. Instead, there was a face that carried the exhaustion of someone who had spent too many nights fighting a battle no one else could see. Before the family member could say a single word, your soulmate softly whispered, "I'm leaving today. If destiny still wants us together, it will have to guide me because I no longer know which road leads back to them." Those words pierced the silence like an arrow. The family members' eyes filled with tears because they realized they had arrived only moments before everything could have changed forever. They reached into their pocket, unfolded what remained of the letter, and placed it into your soulmate's hands. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. They simply watched as the fading handwriting struggled to remain visible. Your soulmate looked down and smiled through tears. "So, it finally tried to find them," they whispered. The family member asked why the letter had been hidden for so many years if every word inside was true. Your soulmate closed their eyes and answered with complete honesty. "Because someone convinced me that they had already forgotten me. That they wanted a different future. And that reaching out would only bring them pain. I believed those lies because I was afraid of becoming the reason they suffered even more." Don't skip. The confession shattered every remaining misunderstanding. The family member admitted that they too had believed those same lies. They apologized for every silent judgment, every cold glance, every time they failed to question what they had been told. But your soulmate gently shook their head. "Blame changes nothing now," they said. "The only thing that matters is whether truth still has enough time to heal what deception destroyed." At that very moment, something unexpected slipped from inside the folded letter. It was a smaller page that had remained hidden between the layers all those years. Neither of them had noticed it before. Unlike the first page, the writing on this one had not faded. It remained perfectly clear, as though it had been waiting for the exact moment the first confession disappeared. The family member carefully unfolded it. Across the top, in unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "If you are reading this second page, then it means fate refused to let the first message die without finishing my story." Their hands trembled as they continued reading. The second page revealed that your soulmate had written 2 letters on the same night. The first one was filled with love. The second contained the truth behind the separation. It described a private conversation that had taken place years earlier, one that changed everything. A trusted person had secretly claimed that you had moved on, that you had chosen another path, and that hearing from your soulmate again would only reopen old wounds. That single lie was repeated so convincingly that it slowly became accepted as reality. Neither of you had ever been given the chance to hear the truth directly from each other. Don't skip. As the final paragraphs were read aloud, an overwhelming silence settled between them. Every missing piece had finally been found. There had never been a lack of love. There had only been distance created by fear, assumptions, and words spoken by people who never truly understood the bond you shared. Your soulmate took a long breath and quietly admitted something they had never confessed to anyone. Every birthday, every holiday, every ordinary day that reminded me of them. I wrote another letter. None of them were sent. I kept believing tomorrow would be the right day. Tomorrow became months. Then years. The family member could no longer hold back their emotions. They asked the question that had been sitting in their heart since the first line of the letter. If they were standing in front of you right now, after everything that happened, what would you say? Your soulmate looked toward the horizon without hesitation. I wouldn't begin with an apology, they replied. I would begin with gratitude. Because despite all the silence, all the confusion, and all the years we lost, loving them was still the most honest thing my heart ever did. Those words lingered in the air like a promise that refused to fade. The wind carried away the last traces of ink from the first letter, but the truth no longer depended on paper. It had already been spoken aloud. It had already changed hearts. And somewhere beyond that moment, a path that once seemed permanently closed had quietly begun to open again, not because the past could be erased, but because the truth had finally found the courage to reveal itself before it disappeared forever. The family member stood in complete silence, unable to forget everything they had just witnessed. The letter had disappeared exactly as it promised, yet every sentence remained carved into their memory. They no longer needed the paper because the truth had already changed them forever. Without wasting another moment, they walked back into the house where everyone had gathered. The atmosphere was calm, but within seconds it would become the most emotional conversation that family had ever experienced. No one understood why their face looked so different until they quietly said, "Everything we believed about them was wrong." Every voice in the room fell silent. No one interrupted. No one questioned. They simply waited, sensing that something far greater than an ordinary conversation was about to unfold. Don't skip. One by one, they repeated every important line they could still remember from the disappearing letter. They spoke about the nights your soulmate cried in silence, the messages that were never sent, the countless times they almost came looking for you, and the heartbreaking confession that they had never stopped choosing you in their heart. With every sentence, the expressions around the room changed. Some people lowered their heads in shame. Others covered their faces with trembling hands. For years they had accepted a version of the story that was never true. They had mistaken silence for indifference and distance for rejection, never realizing that fear and misunderstanding had been controlling every decision behind the scenes. The oldest member of the family slowly stood up, tears filling their eyes before they could even speak. In a quiet voice they admitted, "We spent years protecting everyone from pain. But instead we protected a lie." Those words echoed through the room like a confession no one had expected to hear. Another family member admitted they had once discouraged your soulmate from reaching out because they honestly believed you had already moved on. Someone else confessed they had repeated rumors without ever asking whether they were true. Each confession became another piece of the puzzle that had kept two hearts apart. Don't skip. Your soulmate listened to every word without anger. There was sadness, there was disappointment, but there was also something else beginning to appear: peace. The kind of peace that comes only when the truth no longer has to hide. After a long silence, your soulmate finally spoke. "I lost years believing that letting go was the kindest thing I could do. But every day I let go with my hands. My heart kept holding on. No one could answer. There was nothing left to argue." For the first time in years, everyone understood the depth of the sacrifice that had been made in complete silence. Then your soulmate quietly walked to a small wooden chest hidden inside a closet. They opened it carefully. Inside were dozens of folded letters, each one written on a different date. Some pages had become old and fragile. Others still looked new. Every single one carried your name. Every birthday, every holiday, every lonely night, every moment they wished they could speak to you had become another letter that was never sent. They smiled sadly and said, "The disappearing letter was never the only one. It was simply the only one that fate allowed someone else to read." Don't skip. The family member picked up one of the older letters and asked why none of them had ever been delivered. Your soulmate looked out the window before answering. Because hope is easy to silence when enough people tell you it's already too late. Those words broke the last wall of pride remaining inside the room. One by one, family members apologized, not because they expected immediate forgiveness, but because they finally understood how much had been lost through assumptions instead of honesty. No apology could return the missing years, but each one became the beginning of healing. As dawn slowly approached, your soulmate gathered every unsent letter into a single bundle and tied them together with a simple ribbon. Then, instead of hiding them once again, they placed them on the table where everyone could see them. "No more secrets," they said softly. "No more fear. If our story has another chapter waiting, it will begin with truth, not silence." The rising sunlight entered through the window, illuminating the letters one final time. The first letter had disappeared exactly as it promised, but its purpose had already been fulfilled. It had exposed every lie, awakened every sleeping heart, and reminded everyone in that house that real love does not disappear because of time, it only waits for the courage that truth requires. And somewhere beyond that quiet morning, a journey that should have begun years earlier was finally ready to begin, not with another hidden letter, but with the first honest step toward the person who had never truly left the heart in the first place. Morning arrived with an unfamiliar sense of calm, but beneath that calm every heart in the house knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The long years of silence had finally come to an end. No one spoke loudly. No one rushed to make excuses. Instead, each person sat quietly, reflecting on how easily fear had replaced truth and how one hidden letter had revealed what countless conversations never could. Your soulmate stood near the window, watching the sunrise with a peaceful expression that had not appeared in years. For the first time, they no longer felt trapped between hope and heartbreak. They had accepted one simple truth: whatever happened next would be built on honesty instead of misunderstanding. Don't skip. The oldest member of the family slowly walked toward your soulmate with tears in their eyes. They placed a gentle hand on their shoulder and said, "We cannot return the years that were taken from you, but we can refuse to let another day be stolen by the same mistake." Those words carried more weight than anyone expected. They were not simply an apology, they were a promise that the family would never again allow assumptions to speak louder than the truth. Your soulmate smiled softly and replied, "I don't need anyone to rewrite the past. I only wanted someone to believe what my heart had been trying to say all these years." Silence filled the room once again, but this time it was a peaceful silence rather than a painful one. Don't skip. Before leaving the house, your soulmate looked once more at the bundle of unsent letters resting on the table. Instead of carrying them along, they left them behind. A younger family member asked, "Aren't you taking them with you?" Your soulmate gently shook their head. "No. They belong to the person I used to be. The one who only knew how to write instead of speak. I don't need them anymore." That answer touched everyone deeply. Those letters had served their purpose. They had protected hope through years of loneliness. But now hope no longer needed ink or paper. It needed courage. With steady steps, your soulmate walked toward the front door. No one tried to stop them. Instead, every family member stood behind them, offering quiet support. They understood that some journeys must be taken with faith rather than certainty. Don't skip. As the door slowly closed behind your soulmate, a gentle breeze swept through the room and moved the top page of the remaining letters. Written on the last visible page was a single sentence that no one had noticed before. If love is real, it will never ask time for permission to find its way home. The family member who first discovered the disappearing letter smiled through tears. They carefully folded the page and whispered, "Now I finally understand." The letter had disappeared. The secrets had ended. The lies had been exposed. But love had survived every one of them. And somewhere beyond that quiet morning, two hearts that had spent years walking separate roads were no longer being guided by fear, hidden voices, or broken assumptions. They were finally moving toward the same destination with nothing left to hide. The story that began with a secret letter disappearing in 5 minutes ended with something far stronger, an unshakable truth that could never disappear again, no matter how much time passed.